South Africa, where the controversial Gupta report has been released. The report alleges that the wealthy Gupta family has influence in the appointment of the country's ministers. President Jacob Zuma says he will study the finding of the report before deciding on his next step. The country's former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, a constitutionally mandated anti-graft official, has recommended that a judicial commission of inquiry be set up within 30 days to investigate alleged influence peddling in government. The announcement came hours after the head of state withdrew his application in the High Court in Pretoria, seeking to delay the release of that report.
My instructions are to withdraw the application and to tender costs. My instructions are further not to oppose any costs on the scale of the costs, and we abide the decision of this Honourable Court in relation to those costs.
For more on this now, let's cross over to Johannesburg. CCTV's Angelo Coppola is standing by for a perspective on this developing story. Angelo, the anti-graft report was made public after President Zuma dropped his legal challenge. What are the key highlights, though, from that Gupta report?
Well, it's interesting because it's all about state capture, and Thuli Madonsela has called her report creatively the state of capture. In fact, it points to at least 6 instances where President Zuma has been singled out for executive ethic code violations. These relate to the firing of the Finance Minister Nene. They relate to the appointment or the approach to the Deputy Finance Minister Jonas and an offer of some 600 million rand by the Guptas. There's some interference in the appointment of state-owned entity executives, which involved at least the president and a couple of other senior ministers. There was an interference by the president in the banking relationship between the country's banks and the Guptas. And then in terms of the appointment of Des van Rooyen, his relationship with the Guptas was also highlighted. He spent some 7 days at the Gupta compound prior to his appointment as the finance minister in December. There's also apparent conflicts of interest between the business interests of President Zuma's son and the Guptas. That's also brought to the fore. And what was a lot of time spent on was the Eskom behavior towards Optimum and its sale to Geta, which was a Gupta company. That came under the spotlight. The current CEO of Eskom, Brian Molefe, and his relationship with the Guptas was highlighted. He supposedly made, between the two of them, they made some 80, or between 60 and 80 telephone calls in a period of a month around the deal. Our deputy, the Mineral Resources Minister Zwane's relationship was also highlighted, and his involvement in the sale of the Optimum mine. There was a trip to Switzerland where he supposedly intervened in making this deal happen. That got lots of attention. And then finally, there's a case of 1.2 billion rand that was moved out of South African banks into an Indian bank that was for rehabilitation once the mine had closed. It seems that Minister Zwane signed off on that deal, and that money, at least some of it, has found its way back into the Durban branch of this Indian bank. So it's quite murky, Beatrice.
Well, it does sound quite murky from your end there, Angelo. So what exactly does this mean, though, for the South African leadership? What happens next going forward?
Well, look, I mean, you've made the point that there's a judicial inquiry that's got to be appointed in 30 days. But perhaps key here is the fact that the judge president has to nominate only one senior judge that will chair this commission. So the president can't make his own appointment. So that's important. And perhaps as important is the fact that this report, the State of Capture report, has to be used as the basis for the commission. So essentially, the terms of reference have been created by this Madonsela report. So that's important. National Treasury has to find some cash. In terms of what happens now in terms of leadership, well, the government or the president hasn't said anything yet about the findings. He has said through his spokesperson that he's going to be reading the report. I'm guessing his team are already working through it. And then he'll decide whether he's going to actually pursue any legal options. But essentially, everything has to be tied up within 6 months. That's the appointment, the actual sitting of the commission, and then obviously the findings and the action by the parliament on those findings. It looks like President Zuma is going to sit tight, as far as we can tell at the moment. But as we know, right now he's on his way supposedly to Zimbabwe for a state visit there. So no news from the presidency other than seems like he's going to weigh up his options once he's read through the document.
All right, Angelo Coppola, following the developments out of South Africa.